Hi. Mystery bonus here. Today, I am going to explain a 2020 drama film based on a true event, The Banker. Spoilers ahead. The movie starts with a hearing scene of Bernard Garrett, Anthony Mackie, in Washington, D.C., on 1965. Then, we come in 1954, where brilliant and logical man, Bernard Garrett, and his wife, Eunice Nia Long, migrate with their family from Willis, Texas, to Los Angeles. Bernard planned to use the money, which he's saved, as successful businessman, in order to get into real estate. He finds some buildings that could be a great place to start, but something went wrong for Bernard. He doesn't get any houses. Eunice suggests that Bernard should get a co-investor, and introduces him to her old friend, Joe Morris, Samuel L. Jackson, who possess a club in town. But Bernard don't like Joe, who's amusing, drinking, and uses spicy language. And Bernard decline to work with him. Then Bernard come to the building owner, Patrick Barker, Cole Meany, and says him that if he could sell him the building under $10,000, he will redecorate the building, prosper it back, and pay him. Patrick refuses that initially, but when Bernard is tenacious and insisting, Patrick agrees. After that, Bernard employ Matt Steiner, Nicholas Holt, for decoration of his new apartment. When they are working, two policemen appears, and tells that some tenants complains about Bernard. At last, Bernard shows them the ownership papers of the building, and then the policeman leaves. At that time, racism is still present, and Bernard has experienced this many times since they shift in Los Angeles. Then, Patrick find a building, which is a triumph, and Patrick was impressed. He asks Bernard to go into business with him. They decided to split the profits 50-50. Although, because of the racism of that time, Patrick would do the paperwork, because people would sell to him. The business become hugely successful, and Bernard and Eunice shift into an expensive house. After few days, when Patrick die in his sleep, his wife declined to honor the terms of his contract with Bernard. She argued to buy Bernard out of the properties at 25 cents on dollar, which Bernard is forced to agree. After that, Bernard get an idea to purchase a banker's building in downtown Los Angeles, which contains most of the bankers, knowing that, and by owning it he would be able to gain more knowledge about properties to grow their business. This requires lots of money, so Bernard finally reached to Joe to mention that no one would sell the building to a black man. They require a front person, and Bernard choose Matt Steiner, who had been one of the most modernization workers of Bernard. But Matt says he doesn't know anything about banking, buying buildings, and real estate business. Bernard tells him they will teach him that he needs to know. After that, one girl, Susie, has impressed by Matt, after knowing that he is going to get a partnership of real estate business, so Matt agree with Bernard. Then, in order to make Matt as their face of the business, Bernard and Joe train him for 1 month, how to play golf, how to circulate money, and the calculations of property and buildings. Matt skillfully remember enough information in order to convince the owner to sell. And finally, he manages to convince the owner of the banker building, Charles Renault. And by this, Bernard and Joe become the first black men who own a building in downtown Los Angeles. Matt and Susie get married. After that, they become exceptionally successful in buying properties, and own over 100 buildings all over Los Angeles. After few years in 1963, Bernard goes to see his father in Willis, and his son witness the racism and dissociation still exist. Bernard come up with an idea. He will buy the local mainland bank, and eventually provide loans to black people, in order to allow them to become homeowners, or to start small businesses. Joe knows they would experience extreme racism, and thinks it's not a very good idea. But when Bernard states that he will do it by his own, Joe feels nauseate, but at last he gets on board. Now, for one more time, they need Matt to act as the buyer to incitement the subject, the bank's current owner's son, Robert Florence Jr., Scott Daniel Johnson, who is 20% shareholder of the Mainland Bank. The plan was successful at first, and they become capable of providing loans to black people. But Mainland Bank's owner, Florence visit Bernard and Joe, and shows a photo of them, with Vice President Johnson. He also mentioned that, sooner or later, he is going to unmask, and threatens them, that, if the people come to know all this, the white people would draw their money out. Meanwhile, Matt's wife, Susie, provoked him to not just be an employee, but an owner. Matt proposed a plan to Joe and Bernard, in order to buy a second bank. They believe it's too risky, but Matt apprised them, if he could run his own bank he need to move on, and, without any white person in position, at Mainland Bank, they would be wrecked, so they unwillingly agree. After getting his own bank, Matt buys a collection of loan packages, and shortly his bank get under a federal audit. It comes to know that he did not use the lawyer Bernard suggest for. Instead, Matt asked Florence to help him with a lawyer, who then impose bad loans into the package. Then Matt buys those bad loans at Mainland, hoping it will fix the problem, but eventually it grasps him. Then, U.S. Treasury Department close Matt's Mainland Bank. Joe and Bernard are arrested under the federal laws of banking. Senator McClellan, James Dumont, is conducting the federal trial, and promises Matt he will get 50 consecutive years in prison, if he doesn't testify that he did all those things as Joe and Bernard instructed. McClellan ought to use the trial in order to change banking laws, so that the owners are permanently public information, and proscribing minorities from ever owning again. Matt informed Bernard about that, and says, if he doesn't claim it political during his testimony, and only says he was a puppet, he could abstain jail. On the hearing, Bernard passionately described that the system prohibits black people from getting an opportunity for improvement, the American dream. On that day, Bernard and Joe proved subsequently convicted and sentenced to federal prison. Robert Florence Jr. purchased the Mainland Bank. Bernard and Joe lose all their properties, but one, Bernard, is sentenced to 3 years in jail. When Bernard is released, Joe and Eunice come to pick him up. When Eunice asks Bernard where they're going, Bernard tells that, the night before his testimony, Matt called him, he was terribly guilty, and he manages to provide him 2 houses in the Bahamas. Postscript says that Joe and Bernard were managed to start over and begin doing business from the Bahamas. In 1968, Congress passed the Fair Housing Act, which makes it illegal for anyone to selling or renting property on the basis of race, religion, and gender. And the movie ends here. So, this was it for today. Subscribe for more videos like this, and turn on the notification. Like and share to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.